we had to figure out how to get the ethics committee involved and how to let everybody be on board with this. But she did end up dying, and she died peacefully, and I got to be there. And I think it was just learning how to let people not survive, but in a good way. That was the first very huge lesson for me in nursing, that it wasn't all about doing everything you can, but sometimes not doing anything.
Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is let go. And it's hard.
Hello, and welcome to the Art of Emergency Nursing podcast. This is where we share stories for inspiration, entertainment, and encouragement, because we all know emergency nurses have the best stories. Now here's your host, Kevin McFarland.
Hey everybody, Kevin McFarland here. Thanks for joining me again on the Art of Emergency Nursing. I appreciate you being here and I appreciate you listening. If you haven't done so yet, find us on Facebook and like our page. Our page has some information that we're using for upcoming shows. I have a couple questions there for the audience. One of them is, what advice do you have for precepting new students, both new and experienced providers in the emergency department? I'd love to hear your opinion and your feedback on that. The second one is asking what professional development topics might you be interested in hearing. Thinking about doing some solo shows down the road and talking about some professional development topics that might be of interest to emergency nurses. So go to Facebook, find us on Facebook, and give me some feedback. I'd love to hear it. Our webpage will be released probably later this week if you're listening to this in real time. But the website's coming, so look for an announcement on that on Facebook. Thanks again for listening. I appreciate you taking the time to listen each week. And don't forget to recommend this show to either people you like or people you don't. People who you think need to hear this message. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of our group. My guest today is an old friend of mine who I used to love working with. She had an infectious, great spirit. She was always in a good mood. And she was one of those people that would just completely raise the morale and the spirit of a shift whenever she was working. She was a fantastic addition to work with in the emergency department. She's gone forward now and has become a nurse practitioner, and I'm sure she's still giving stellar care. My guest this week is Kate Gerber.
My name is Kate Gerber, and I have been an ER nurse emergency nurse for 21 years, and about 5 of that was in flight. And I decided after that many years to go back to school, and now I have become a nurse practitioner, and I work in an urgent care in my local town, Albuquerque.
Nice. How did you get into nursing, Kate?
I got into nursing as a very young girl. My best friend growing up, her mom was a high-risk OB nurse. She would come home every day and tell me all of her stories about all of her high-risk patients and her high-risk babies, and how much she loved her job. I think at that time I didn't want to do OB necessarily, but I definitely knew I wanted to do high-risk emergency situations. And I really give credit to Shelley for pushing me in that direction. So eventually when I moved to Kansas and started nursing school, it just was my path and what I knew I wanted to do.
At what point in your career were you like, yep, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing?
The first day of nursing school.
No,
honestly.
no kidding. Nobody says that
kidding.
answer.
No, it's really true. Like, I loved it. I loved that I was there. I loved that I got in, and loved that this was going to be my life.
What did you like about nursing school?
I think I had such respect for my instructors. I think we all have some instructors that are really, really good and some that aren't so good, but I think that you always learn who you want to be from the people that you're around, and I really had taken a liking to several of my instructors and their compassion and the way that they were nurses and the way that they loved it and the way that they took me and wanted me to be that kind of nurse as well.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
What advice did one of your nursing instructors give you that you've kept with through all your years?
I think never lose the reasons why you went into nursing, because I think so many times you can, if you have difficult patients or if you don't deal with certain situations well or if you make a mistake. I think never forget the real reason why you went into nursing school. and always just carry that with you. And I always did. I always had, no matter what mistakes I made or no matter what challenges I faced or long days or long hours or difficult patients or sad patients. I think I never really forgot that. I always knew the next day. Nursing's been never one. It's always been one of those jobs where I've woken up every single day, and I've always looked forward to it.
That's awesome. What did your family think about you going into nursing?
They loved it. My mom was very jealous. My mom actually wanted to be a nurse, but she ended up taking a different direction in school, and she went into medical records, where she became the administrator at the VA hospital in San Francisco. And so she kind of went a different direction, but she'd always say, "Gosh, you're going to be a nurse. That's amazing. I've always wanted to do that." My dad, of course, was very happy.
Did they have any advice to you in being a nurse?
No, not really. Just I think that they thought I was always a compassionate person, and so I think they thought it was a really good place for me and my personality.
Nice. If it was all gone tomorrow and you couldn't be a nurse, what would you do?
Oh my gosh.
It's a hard thing to think about.
Wow, that really is. And I couldn't be any type of nurse, huh?
Nope.
Like anything, not even teeth?
Nursing's out. Nursing is 100% out.
Oh, man. What would I be? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know. I'd probably learn German remarkably well and then live in Germany for a year with my family.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about a patient that changed the way you practice.
I think that originally when we all go into nursing, we think that we are going to make such a difference in people's lives, and I think that they early on put a definition on how that change is going to help people. And I think the change when I was in nursing school in 1996, the change was always, you're going to be there to help people get better and help people heal and these kinds of things. And I think where it turned for me, where I realized that sometimes helping people not get better was not necessarily in my plans. I was the house supervisor in Kansas, and there was a lady, and it was very controversial at the time. The hospitals, it was a Catholic hospital, and they really didn't know how to handle it much, but a lady she was there for hyperkalemia, and all of her electrolytes were way out of whack, and she was a dialysis patient. And after about a week and a half of being there, she had pneumonia, and her potassiums went way out of whack with sepsis and whatnot, and she just decided she didn't want to do dialysis anymore. So I think that for me, changing the outlook on that, the hospital really had a difficult time changing their outlook and how to let somebody die. Nobody knew how to let her die peacefully. The doctor signed off on her chart and said, "I'm sorry, I'm going to have to fire you as a patient, and you're going to have to sign against medical advice." But she couldn't go home because she was too sick, and we couldn't send her home. But she just wanted to die in the hospital. She wanted to stop dialysis and just go. She was tired of it after years of this. And I think that we didn't know how to let her go as providers. We didn't know how to do that. So two doctors wrote her off, and one just, I think she had an internal medicine doctor, Dr. Mangosian, come in, and he signed up for her chart, but everybody just kind of wrote her off. And we had to figure out how to get the ethics committee involved and how to let everybody be on board with this. But she did end up dying, and she died peacefully, and I got to be there. And I think it was just learning how to let people not survive, but in a good way. That was the first very huge lesson for me in nursing, that it wasn't all about doing everything you can, but sometimes not doing anything.
Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is let go.
Mm-hmm,
and
exactly.
it's hard though. And I would imagine if you're a doctor who doesn't, I don't know. Do you think it comes down to their faith? Do you think it's a faith-based question of
I think that it is. I do think that it's a big faith thing. And despite that it was a Catholic hospital, there was many, obviously, non-Catholics that work there, clearly.
Of course.
But I think that, I think doctors, they don't they don't know that side of it. Like, doctors are not trained to do that side of it. That's not what they're trained for. And they're and nurses aren't necessarily trained for it either. But I think that there's a liability standpoint. I'm sorry, if you're not going to let me do everything you can, then you have to sign out against medical advice. And it was the first really big challenge, and I'll never forget it. It was in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was the hospital had never encountered somebody just wanting to stop dialysis but was going to die in a hospice inpatient there. We had DNR status and stuff, but we've never had somebody not be transferred to the dialysis unit when they needed it, and that was kind of the cause of their death if they didn't get dialysis.
Yeah.
So I think the hospital felt some sort of liability. They were going to be the cause of this, and they just couldn't do it. Nobody knew how to do this. The ethics committee finally got on board, but the ethics committee were the chaplains and the physicians and the nurses too, so nobody really knew how to do this back then, and we did it. She got to die a very peaceful death, and the hospital did it. So I think it really changed St. Catherine's for early on that I was there.
That's cool. What lesson from that did you bring forward in your practice? Like, how has that shaped your practice, do you think?
Oh, definitely. When you see that there's, this kind of cliche now, but it wasn't back then, when I thought, wow, there really are worse things than dying.
Ain't that the truth?
I think that you have to just kind of go through your career knowing that if people are in such bad positions or shape or don't have a good quality of life, like, what does quality mean to them? And if it doesn't mean quality to them, then quality of dying is definitely a better way to go.
Absolutely. Tell me about the first time you made a med error.
Oh my gosh. It's so dumb. It was, I think it was Malox. It was so dumb, but I remember it devastated me.
You're like, oh my God.
I did. I was like, wait, what? It was like on a med surg floor, but
was this as a nursing student or
it was as a nursing student? Yeah.
How funny.
Yeah.
You probably beat yourself up for a week over it.
Oh, I did. I was like, oh my God, maybe I just can't be trusted. Maybe I just can't be trusted. It was really dumb. It was so dumb, but there's been others after that and stuff. And I think you do just get really, really hard on yourself. Yeah.
Do you remember? Sure. Do you remember one when you were actually practicing?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think. I'm trying to think of one specifically. I think I hung a wrong antibiotic on somebody, on the wrong patient, I think is what I did. I think it was like a Zoazin drip or something like that, an antibiotic. And it's devastating. They're all devastating. They were all devastating to me. It always made you question, yourself and
question everything.
You question everything. You're like, well, maybe I'm just in the wrong field. Maybe I'm not paying attention. Why are my thoughts so diverted, and stuff? Because to do the rights and to check the patient, everything. And you think that you do, but, from the minute that you get called 3 or 4 times through the hallway to a different patient's room, you just think you've got it all in your brain, but I guess you don't. So
yeah,
we're all human. I haven't made any life-changing ones, thank God. But
thank God, knock on wood, right?
Yeah, I know, exactly, yeah.
Tell me about a patient that touched your heart.
Oh my gosh, where do you even begin with that one?
It's a tough one. There's a lot. It's probably many. It's probably many. Mm-hmm. But tell me one that really stands out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll never forget that dialysis one for sure. But there's God, heaven, there's so many. Let me see here. Probably as of just several years back, actually, it was in flight. But there's countless number of patients. But there was a 3-year-old that I picked her up, and I think it was Deming. Can't really remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. She was a 3-year-old, and she had they couldn't find her red reflex in her eyes, So they were concerned, and they didn't have a CAT scan down there, so they're sending her to UNM to find out if she had retinoblastoma.
Wow.
And yeah, when I got her in the plane and everything, she had no red reflex at all, and she had vision changes. She was having severe pain in that eye, and she, of course, because she's 3, she touched my heart, and her mom just cried and cried at the thought of her daughter having cancer. And we got her to UNM, and I kind of followed her. So she ended up having retinoblastoma, and I would go and visit her at UNM when she was in the PICU, and they had to remove her eye and this kind of thing. And she had many chemo treatments and radiation and this kind of thing. Then they had to go back in. I think she turned 4, and they had to go back in and take out part of her. Well, they took out all of her eye, but they had to take out part of her brain. I think it encapsulated in her tumor in her brain.
Oh my God.
And then just as of last month, so her mom had friended me on Facebook, and so I've been kind of following her, and she passed away a couple weeks ago.
Oh.
I know.
Oh, that's hard.
It is hard.
Holy
yeah.
cow. And to follow them like that and follow them for a while. She
gave me a and I never did that. I always make it a personal policy not to get on Facebook with my patients or things like that. But the mom and I had such a close bond with her daughter that she friended me before I even dropped her off.
Wow, that's crazy.
And I was like, I'm going to follow her because she's really great, and her daughter was amazing. So
holy cow.
Anyway.
And those are the kind of patients that'll touch your heart, and she'll never forget you ever.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. It was a good one.
So I asked you earlier about the best advice one of your mentors have given you. What's the worst advice you ever got as an ER nurse?
Oh, gosh. Worst advice as an ER nurse. Oh, okay. This is a really good one, and I think really important for ER nurses. There, early on back in the day, and Kevin, you're well aware of this, there was a day that if you, and it might have just been where I came from, I'm not sure, but I like to think not, but there was a day that if you, cried after a code, or you got emotional, or you got, teary-eyed or whatever, then I think I got teary-eyed on this one case. I had a kid that came in, and this was in Kansas, and he was 9 years old, which at that time was the same age as my oldest son. And he and his friend, it was, what am I trying to say? It was parent-teacher conferences that day. So their dad, the other kid's dad, was a sheriff's officer, so they took him out shooting for the day. Well, they ended up having to go to the parent-teacher conferences, and the other kid had gotten hold of a gun, and it had gone off, and it actually came through the living room and hit this kid in the head.
Oh,
so
my
when he
God.
when he came to me, they were coding him, and he looked exactly like my son, exactly the same age. He was blonde hair, brown eyes, and we couldn't revive him.
Oh my gosh.
And afterwards, I just broke down and I just started crying. I was like, this is crazy that this happened, and it was just so unfortunate. And I literally had another ER nurse say, Kate, if this isn't the place for you, and if this is too hard, maybe you should consider a different type of nursing.
Really?
And yeah, and there was a thought way back when, and hopefully they're better at it now about, because now they've got critical incident stress management teams, and they really support that, and they have chaplains check on nurses now, and they have a whole team dedicated to making sure that we're okay. But that's not the way that it was early on in my career. We didn't have that team, and there was a full belief that, if you shed a tear then it was a sign of weakness and you couldn't handle it, and that maybe you need to consider doing something else.
Wow.
And it was then I was like, no, I'm obviously above this. I can do this. It was so awful for me to tell the family, and it was awful for us to be there, and to have to code this kid. But so anyway, I think that the worst advice ever was talking to other nurses that come in and letting them think that crying is a sign of weakness.
Yeah. I think every nurse most nurses I know have cried at one point or another for a patient or about a patient or something related to the patient. And no matter how big and tough you are, sometimes they touch your heart. And I mean, and when you get to the point where it doesn't affect you, then you need to go do something else.
Yeah, exactly.
Is my opinion.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
'Cause
it's weird that there was that day, though. You know what I mean? And they actually have incorporated, if you remember, they've incorporated that part of it into TNCC, into, you know, kind of critical incident stress management and talking to nurses and letting them be sad. But that's a very, very recent, I mean, recent to me for as old as I am, that's a very recent change, like within the last 10 years.
Yeah. And it almost has to be. It becomes survival. I mean, if you just bottle all that stuff up, where's that going to go? I mean, stress is stress. Our body doesn't know whether it's our stress or somebody else's stress. If we're feeling it, our body feels it. And,
exactly.
And that's, I think
it's hard to go back every day. And I think that kind of goes right along the same, you know, wavelength as laughing at terrible situations or laughing at goofy things that happen during codes or, you know, doing silly things to try and lighten the mood or, you know, I think all of that, every bit of it plays a part in surviving emergency nursing. You have to laugh at the most inappropriate times. You have to cry at sad things, and you have to be happy when people die, and you have to be sad when people live. Like, it's just part of life, because there are sad situations out there that you have to find value and quality that you don't always find in the living.
Yeah. I think
you know what I mean?
We definitely have that gallows humor, right? Like, it's our survival thing, really.
Mm-hmm.
That's you're absolutely right.
You don't do it for 20 years if you can't.
Right.
We're old, Kevin.
I know. I'm feeling old every day. So, what kind of silly things have you done to kind of lighten the mood in a department?
Oh my God!
Anything that you can share that won't get you in trouble?
It won't get me in trouble. Oh, that's good. That's really good. Oh, I think I've done lots of goofy things. Lots of goofy things. I don't know if you were working that day at UNM, but I was just being a goofball, and I had like these really big, you know, those big like big scissors, like that are just absolutely gigantic, you know. And I always used to ask Philip for his trauma scissors because I never seem to have had mine. And he'd always like, you got to get some scissors, Kate. You got to get some scissors. And so one day I had shoved this, and it was literally 3 feet long, big of scissors. And I hid them under my scrubs, and I had the whole pointy end going down. And they were plastic, but going down one leg of my pants. And during a trauma, and it was not a big trauma. It was not a huge one, but and they were completely stable. So I pulled those scissors out of my pants, and the whole team just started cracking up. They're like, "Oh my God, you know, look at Gerber. She's so dumb," you know. So
that's funny. Holy cow!
It was funny.
That's
I know. Yeah. Yeah. Lots of goofy things. I had, you know, remember Jenny when she was working? We were working on Sandia one time, and she had this patient. He was just devastated. He had a nail that he drilled a nail through his hand, and he was sitting there in the bed, and he was just devastated, and she was trying to start an IV on him, and I just walked in, and I went, "Oh, Jesus." And he goes, "A nurse with a sense of humor, now that's what I like."
That's funny.
Because he had a nail in his hand, yeah.
Oh, that's terrible. It took me a minute. That's terrible. Oh, my God, Kate, that's the worst joke ever. Oh my God.
I know, but he loved it. He absolutely loved it. He started laughing so hard. He was like, "That is so funny."
It took me a minute. I'm sitting there going, "Did I miss something?" I'm like, "Wait a minute.
Did I miss something?"
I'm like, "Did I miss something?" Oh my gosh. Oh no, that's definitely going in the episode for sure.
It was just subtle. He just started laughing so hard he completely forgot about the trauma to his hand.
That's funny. That's funny.
Oh, that's good.
Tell me a patient story that you always think of when someone says, "Tell me a funny story from the ED." What's your go-to funny story?
Probably the most inappropriate ones.
Oh, that's the best ones.
I don't know. Probably not for recording.
Oh, come on. That
I
one.
can tell it, but then I'll tell it, but then you have to like cut it out if it's too inappropriate.
Okay. Okay. Let's hear it, and then we'll make the decision.
Okay, and it's because it's really bad, and it's not necessarily bad on the part, like I wasn't making fun of her, but so this girl comes in, and you probably know the story. She came in and she had a vibrator stuck up her bottom. So she was in the trauma room because we were trying to get it out and try and save her from going to surgery, but we couldn't get it, couldn't grasp onto it, and so anyway, she literally was there waiting for surgery for hours, Kevin, and it was literally like 5 hours later, she just laid there. She laid on her stomach,
Oh, God.
and she was just crying. She was embarrassed, and I wasn't embarrassed for her. I didn't really think anything of it until like 5.5 hours later. I was just laughing so hard because I'm thinking to myself, it's still going, and what kind of batteries does she use? I should ask her because it's still going. I was so flat on the battery choice. Like I was like, I forgot to ask her what we were. It was a really funny situation. The poor girl started laughing, but it was really funny.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, probably ought to not use that one, but
that's actually perfect for this podcast.
Oh no! Oh God! Yeah, well, it's true. Let me tell you.
That's just perfect for this podcast. I'm telling you. That's
okay.
That kind of funny, nurse humor is exactly what I'm looking for.
Oh my gosh, I really did ask her to, and it happened to be Energizer, which is really funny.
Keeps going and going.
Keeps going and going and going. I know. And it did. It did.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's really funny. How was your transition from being an emergency nurse and a flight nurse to becoming a nurse practitioner?
Oh, well, I'm still in it.
Yeah.
And I think that it's been humbling, for sure, but I really so enjoy it. And I really can't imagine not having the 20 years or so doing that to where I am doing this now. I think I can't even wrap my mind around that. I think it's so important to be able to determine sick from unsick.
Yeah.
That so many people don't have, even as practitioners. That just that behind my belt is just priceless for where I'm at now. But it's a huge responsibility, and it's a huge thing. Like we used to bark at the residents, this person needs some Zofran, they're nauseous. Just give them an order for some Zofran. And, then when you get into this side of it, you're like, yeah, but, what is their EKG? It could prolong their, PRs, like it's just a whole different way of thinking of things that you thought were so benign that you would say, gosh, why doesn't this guy do this? I just need a simple order.
Yeah, just
but
give
there's
me
so
the
many more.
Just give me the
but there's so many more things behind it that you have to think about. So it's not such a benign thing.
Yeah. Certainly the knowledge, with the extra knowledge comes the extra responsibility, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's been quite enjoyable, and I've learned so much, but I feel like I'm the new guy again, which is a really hard adjustment because, I haven't been the new guy in a very long time.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
But that's good. I like that.
So a couple questions that I may cut out of the actual interview and put someplace else, but tell me, what's been your experience with nurse bullying?
Oh. Well, I have had quite a bit of experience with nurse bullying and just seeing it, more than anything. Actually, Kevin, and I felt there was a lot of the older nurses that didn't really give some people the time of day, which is really sad. I don't know. It's like they do. I mean, and it's everywhere, but I think I've never personally experienced it except for maybe, like the time I told you about, as far as getting teary-eyed and then an older nurse saying to me, well, then maybe you're not cut out for ER.
Yeah.
I think that in and of itself is a form of bullying, but I think I've always seen nurses eat their young. I think I always wanted to be that person who doesn't do that, and I think you try really, really hard. I think that my motto has always been, because I've precepted forever. I've always been a preceptor, and I've always enjoyed doing it. And I've always had the thought that if people failed, it was never going to be because of me. If people didn't make it, it was going to be because of them. They were going to know they didn't
Fair
make
enough.
it because of them.
Yeah.
They didn't have all the tools possibly given to them, to not be successful.
Yeah.
But a lot of people did withhold that. A lot of people felt like that they didn't know. I had, as an example, I had a new grad come in with me in the emergency room. This is in Kansas, and they never had the opportunity to put together a suction machine or use it. And I think we all just assume that it's a suction machine. People know how to put the canister and put the lid on and hook it up to the patient and then to the vacuum and which tube goes where. You just assume that, and this person never had it, and the other nurse just let him have it. And ever since then, like whenever I would give a tour in the room, or if they'd never seen the trauma room, I'd just say, okay, you know how to do this, and you take this lid off. And I never made them admit to me that they didn't know how. So I never would make them admit to me they didn't know how to run a defibrillator. I would just make that part of my teaching, because I'd seen so many people over the years be humiliated.
Right. I think I don't know how many experienced nurses I've seen come through that you're like going, oh, you're an experienced nurse and you've never done this. But I try to make that assumption. I try not to make that assumption that just because I have that experience means that you do. So I like how you said, you say, hey, I'm going to show you this, whether you need to know it or not. Just kind of watch this for a second and we'll talk about it if you want to. Is a good way to do it, because I know there's been things that I as a nurse, and I'm going, I've never done this. And I've realized that more now in my current role, where there's things that, some of the nurses are asking me to do. I'm like, I've never done that before. And it's, and you.
A perfect example of that is like pacing somebody. When is the last time? I think I had gone years without pacing somebody. And,
yeah, it's been a long time.
When there's people who maybe have never paced, even though they've been ER nurses. So you always make sure that you're not having them admit they don't know how, but you just show them how.
Yeah,
regardless.
We had a case recently where we had to give TPA, and I have a crew of very experienced ICU nurses, but none of them have ever given TPA. So I was like, well, I guess I kind of asked the question, like, are you comfortable with this? And they were like, no, I've never done this. And I was like, okay, well, let's do it together. And they're like, well, have you done TPA? I'm like, yeah, I've given it a couple times, but it's been a while. I've been away from the bedside for a little bit. So, but I was like, but we'll do it together. And they were like, all right. And we just kind of walked through the indications, the contraindications, and all those cautions. But here's a very experienced ICU nurse, and she'd never given TPA.
Right.
So, and I guess
depends on the days you work.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's things that I, as an ER nurse to this day, I've never done. There's things I've never had the opportunity to do. And then there's those random things that I'm like, yeah, I never had to do that, but we trained that enough that I got it.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I remember getting called to the OR to open up an auto transfuser in a chest tube, and you're sitting there going, how many times have you done that in your career? Like,
exactly.
Maybe none. And there's plenty of people that have never done that in their career. So then when it was, when the pressure was on and they're up in the OR and they have this chest tube that's just pouring out blood, they're like, hey, we need to auto transfuse. And I was like, luckily we had drilled that enough that I was like, I got this. I know how to do that.
Yeah.
And when other people maybe hadn't had that experience. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I came across a guy, and I don't know if you remember him. Boy, he was given such a hard time in the ER, and he eventually didn't make it. But do you remember Kevin?
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah, but people just didn't. They didn't like him. I think he eventually went to OBS there for a while, but people just treated him terribly because he was slow typer. He was just slow thought process. He just didn't.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought that he should fail, and I didn't. Like, I just wanted to make sure he had every possible tool under his belt to be successful, and he ended up leaving, I think, anyway. But yeah, just some people just, I don't know. I always told myself that if he wasn't going to do well, it was because of him, not because of me.
Yeah. Do you think some people are meant for the ER and others aren't?
Definitely, yeah, I do. But like I said, that's not my call. And I've seen people that I questioned. I'm like, oh no, they're going to really, really struggle, and they have just taken off. And they're wonderful ER nurses now, So I think it's just, what I think? I really do think it's a lot about who you're lucky enough to get as a preceptor. I think that there are people who can make or break you. And I think if people have your best interest in their heart, I think that you can do well. You can do very, very well. But I think that you have to have somebody who wants to take the time.
I think precepting is absolutely critical. It's so critical that you're right. They can make or break you. And the right
precept. I had such good preceptors.
The right preceptor will either make somebody either fantastic or will allow them to fail.
But you know who I can tell, honestly, I can probably walk into the emergency room and I could probably just look at the old ER nurses and I can tell you who had good preceptors and who didn't.
Yeah.
You just can tell. You just know. You know the people who took the time with them, and because people go one of two ways. They find good people who they want to be like, or they find people who they don't want to be like.
I think
what I mean. And they want.
You're right. We learn something from everybody. Sometimes it's who we want to be, and sometimes it's I'm never going to do what they did.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're right.
And so I think it depends on your personality, but I think it also depends on who you're lucky enough to get with.
Yeah.
And if they're the kinds of people who tell you that you should always be humble and you should always treat people with respect, no matter who they are, if you have that kind of preceptor, you'll carry that with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I always think of myself as a culmination of many nurses who poured their skill into me. And and made me the nurse that I am today. So
exactly.
And my job is to honor them and then pass that along.
Exactly. That's even more important too, is that you pass it along.
Yeah.
But and there's been many cases in my career where I would just think back about a situation. I think back about what would this person do in this situation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How would they handle it? How would they carry themselves? How would they handle it? How do they treat others? This kind of thing. And I often reflect back to some of my earliest preceptors.
Who's a preceptor that changed the way you practice?
Her name was Becky Tomachek. And she's actually passed away.
Oh.
She died of cancer
about
2 years ago.
Oh, man.
Yeah. She made a huge difference. And another good friend, Pam Washburn, these nurses were phenomenal nurses. They didn't know everything. They didn't teach ACLS. They didn't do all that. But let me tell you, when they walked into the room, you knew you were cared about, and you knew that they were the biggest patient advocates, and they just were phenomenal nurses.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of things I love hearing that. I love hearing the impact that some nurses have made on other nurses' careers. That's just cool.
Oh, yeah. So many, though. I must have just been really lucky.
Yeah. No, I think we gravitate to who we're going to learn from.
Yeah. Or who you want to be most like.
or who you want to be most like. I'll never forget, there was a guy named Steve that I used to work with, and Steve was, when I first went in the emergency department at Presbyterian Hospital, I was, brand new. I think I was 20-something years old. And I remember watching Steve, and Steve was always so smooth. He was always so smooth, and he was always so great with patients. Patients just loved him. They loved, and he was, kind of had that southern drawl, and he's, kind of sticky sweet. And he'd be like, "Come on, sweetie, let's get your clothes off." And, I was sitting there going, this guy's just smooth, man. He's just so good. And I remember him being, he was kind of a big dude, and he was so good at the smallest little IVs. I remember watching him with a 24 gauge angiocath in his hands and going, how in the world does this big, barehanded guy going to handle this 24 gauge angio, and he did like a pro every single time. And I just remember, thinking to myself, God, I want to be a nurse like that guy.
That's awesome. I know.
It's kind of funny. It's kind of funny because years later, he, after I became a nurse, he worked as a nurse in the ER at UNM, and he was a little bit past his prime. And I remember going, oh, okay, he's not so much of a stud now, but he's still pretty good. But my perspective had changed a little bit. So
yeah, I was just gonna say, I think you're a phenomenal nurse.
Oh, you're kind to say that. I appreciate that.
No, I really do. Like when I think of good nurses who've been nurses a long time, I think of you.
That's very sweet. That's kind of you to say. So I've had, like I said, I've had a lot of good nurses pour their knowledge and their experience into me. And, I've had the opportunity to watch a lot of fantastic nurses that are, that have forgotten more about nursing than I know. And it's always impressive to be with those people and see those people and try to learn from them and hopefully take a little bit of what they taught and pass it on. So just part of what I want to do with this podcast. I think that, there's so many nurses that don't get a good preceptor, that don't get to hear lessons and the wisdom of experienced nurses, that hopefully this will, be something for them. So
yeah, I think that's awesome, Kevin. I'm glad you're doing it, because there is so much to be said, good and bad, about just who you want to be. But I do believe, though, that it starts with the person. I think people, seek out who they, what they want. If they want to be involved in gossip and not really be productive, or if they want to, I think people kind of choose that in your personality. Yeah. But I think if you really do want to go in there and try and touch all the lives that you can and really just make somebody's experience a little bit better, I think that you do. I think you're right. You gravitate to those people and you hold on to them and you learn from their experiences.
Yeah. What do you hope your nursing legacy is when you're retired and you're done and people are looking back at your career? What do you hope people remember?
Golly. I don't know. I'd like to say being smart, but I think it's more important to me that people think that I'm was compassionate and loving. I think that that's probably, I definitely want to be smart, and I definitely want to make the right decisions, and you don't want to hurt anybody, but I also think that I hope that people know that everything that I ever did came from a good place.
That's cool. What advice would you give a brand new emergency nurse?
The best advice, if you want to be a darn good emergency nurse, practice for a year or two and then get in and teach something. I don't care what you teach. I don't care if you teach a part of an ACLS class or you teach a part of a TNCC class, or you just, if you get involved in individual people giving presentations to your group for teaching purposes or whatever. But I think I think you always have to be so much better to teach a class than to ever take one. And if you want to be a really good ER nurse and keep it interesting, learn something very, very well. Doesn't have to be everything, but pick something and learn it very well and then teach it to somebody.
I like that advice. That's good advice, because it's you really got to know something if you're going to teach it.
Yeah, so. You do.
So the last question I have...
You don't have to know everything. Okay.
No, you don't have to know everything. Not by far at all. So one of the cool things we used to do with our CEN reviews that I used to really like is that we would have one person teach a section and be like, know this section really well and teach that to the group, which I think was successful.
That's what I did with endocrinology for the CEN.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But even before that, I just, I taught a section, remember when ACLS was well, maybe it still is, I don't know, but 2 days thing. And
Yeah.
they take the batteries out of the laryngoscope just to flub you up. It was, you got a pen at the end of it, remember, if you passed and everything.
Yeah.
It was like such a big deal. But, I just took a part of that, and I taught like each individual section. I would teach, just, the bradycardias or whatever. Just do something and learn it very, very well. And be that go-to person that people go, who knows this really well? I'm going to go to this person because they know it really well.
Yeah. You're like, I have a chest tube set up. Let me go get Kate. Hold on one second.
Yeah.
Very cool. The last question I have for you is a hard one, and it's called 3 things. What are 3 things an emergency nurse should always remember, and what are 3 things that they should just forget?
3 things an emergency nurse should always remember?
Yep.
I think probably the first thing is, it's probably pretty cliche, but probably be, not be judgmental.
Yeah.
Maybe don't try to understand everybody's situation if you don't, but always remember to check your equipment, and that's probably a big one. Don't take that for granted.
Absolutely.
And tie your shoes.
Good advice.
And golly. Okay, I think this is super important. It goes along with what we were talking about. Seek out the good eggs.
Okay, I like that.
Always seek out the good eggs, and your longevity as an ER nurse career will soar if you seek out the good eggs.
Yeah, surround yourself with good people.
Yep.
What should they forget? That's the harder part. What should they forget? If you could just erase something from ER nurses' minds, what would the 3 things be?
I'd say you don't want to forget the things that didn't go well, but you want to learn from them.
Yeah.
I'd say forget being hard on yourself.
That's good.
Forget being hard on others.
Like that.
And move on past your bad days. You know what I mean? Just get rid of them, move on. Everybody has bad days. Don't lose sleep at night. Just be your best person the next day. Just forget about the days that were not your shining days.
Gotcha. I like that. It's good advice.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a House of God moment. Did you ever read the book House of God?
I have. What was your House of God moment?
My House of God moment, and this is an absolute true story, was my first ICU code when I was a student, and it was before I even read House of God, and so I didn't even know. So I was trying to stand back and watch everybody's part. I saw the pastor, I saw RT, because they had RT in this hospital where they managed the airway, and then the physicians, the nurses, and everything else, and everybody was doing their part. And instead of me focusing on what everybody's role was to run a perfectly great code and what meds they were pulling out of the door and what they were calling for, all I could think of was how awful that guy looked. And I pray to God that I don't look like that when I die, because he looked so terrible. He had a PE.
You're like, I know
a femur fracture from falling off of a ladder hanging up Christmas lights, and he threw a fat emboli to his lung. But he was so swollen. From the neck up, he was literally purple. I mean, I just remember thinking, oh my God. And, and at that time I didn't know that was just a PE death. You know what I mean? I just was like, that's what people look like when they die? Oh my God. Like, I just thought, this is horrible.
Oh my gosh. I gotta add that question. Tell me about the first patient you seen who died. I gotta add that as a question.
You should, because that was a funny story for me. Like, I was just like, holy shit, look how big his nose is. Like, his ears are even swollen. Oh my God, he looks awful.
That's funny.
I'm all looking at him from a cosmetic standpoint instead of a nursing standpoint, It was terrible.
That's funny. I remember one of the patients I seen that, he just looked like he was gonna die, and I remember he was looking at me, and I'll never forget it. It was in the recess room of the old building, and he looks at me and he goes, "Am I gonna die?" And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, "You damn straight you're gonna die. You're gonna die today." But I said, no, you're good. You're in good hands. We're gonna do the best we can to take care of you. You know, I can never say yes or no, but you're in good hands. You're in good hands, and we're gonna take good care of you. And I remember thinking to myself, they have no idea what's going on with this guy. And fast forward a year later, I see this guy come back into the recess room. A year later, the guy comes back to the recess room. Looks exactly the same way he did before. The exact same way. He looks exactly the same. And he's like, "I remember you." And I'm like, "Oh shit, and I remember you." And he's like, "Last time I was here, you told me I wasn't going to die, and it made me feel better." And I was like going, "I can't believe you're still alive. I can't believe you're still alive."
Like shocked.
I'm like going, "Wow, I'm as surprised to see you as you are seeing me. Holy smokes." And I remember telling the doc, I'm like, "You looked exactly the same exact way last year. So whatever he had then is probably what he's got going on now." And it was exactly what he had going on now. He had polycythemia, and he was just so red and muddied face, and just looked terrible. And I just remember thinking to myself, this guy looks like he's going to die. And he didn't. And he didn't die.
And he didn't.
The second time either. And I was like, holy smokes, wow. The amazing medical miracles that we do here.
Yeah, it is true. It is true. That also reminds me of that House of God part where the resident goes in there and he gets called to the ER, and it's Mrs. Jones or whatever, and she's an old COPDer, and he goes in there and everything, and she gasps, and she's, everything, and she just dies. All of a sudden she just dies, and she's, blue, and she's had been in there like for years, and they know her by her first name and everything like that, and pulls a blanket over her head and walks out of the room, and this attending walks by, and he goes, "Well, Mrs. Jones passed away." And the attending grabs the chart and looks at it, and he goes, "Miss, Alma Jones?" And he goes, "Yeah, she passed away." And he goes, "Alma Jones, this with COPD?" And he goes, "Yeah, with COPD. Yep, she just passed away." And he goes, walks in the room, pulls a sheet down, sits her up, and he goes, "Mrs. Jones," and she goes, he looks at the resident, and he goes, "COPDers don't die. They just keep coming back. They don't die." Do you remember that part of the book?
I do remember
and
that
the
part.
resident was just like, "Wait, what? What?"
Like, what do you mean? That's funny. What a great book. That should be like required reading for every ER nurse.
I know, they should. It was a good one. It was a good one.
So,
well, I'm glad I could help you, Kevin. I hope it helped.
Kate, this was a ton of fun. I really appreciate you doing this with me. Thank you so much for your time. Anytime.
It's so good to talk to you. And tell Jenny hi, and I'm thinking of her.
Thanks for listening to the Art of Emergency Nursing podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Facebook.